that Indians and coastal Indians used seawater, salt water, with their limestone enclosures. Or if they dug with clay on a coastal area, which already exposure to salt water, and the salt, in fact, mixes with the lime. And I'm not a chemist by any means, but somehow it reduces the lime copper limestone shard. Lime will actually, during the firing process, will pop on the side. So a lot of your limestone shards have a very rough surface. So machine gun, machine gun all the way around is very, very rough. That's when the lime pops up. And if it pops not, of course, during the firing process, the split will actually blow up. And the shell actually, the calcium in the shell acts much the same manner as the lime. So I think probably most pottery is a predominance of sand tempering as opposed to the lime shell. But that was used. And then the fiber tempering lasted a long time, between 2000 and 1000 BC is quite a stretch. And it was, in fact, a very strong method. It increased the porosity. Porosity being pulled, as it will, through the clay body after it was fired. The pot was inclined to, say, crack or in the cooking process. Because of the porosity, because of the fibers, it would extend the fracture of the stock. So it could be used over and over again, fracture around the ground, maybe not all the way through the wall, but somewhere in between on the surface on the inside. And eventually have these pots would fall apart, but they were very, very durable pots. We'll go outside and we'll go to the pit fire.
Hey, long time no see. Well, thank you. We had a nice trip.
Firing. But basically, the key, besides drying the pots totally through and through as much as possible for the firing process, is to bring them up to an even temperature and as hot as possible before putting them through a much higher heating process. And by sun drying them, and then by rotating them next to the fire pit. And I imagine most fire pits probably initially were the actual cooking hearths. They probably used the cooking hearth, and then from that point, once they began making their pots, probably developed the pit. And perhaps too, the earliest pottery, the coil pots, were discovered by the pit itself, the wall being fired by the cooking pot, the cooking right in the fire. And but to dry them out and to bring up the temperature very, very evenly, and so by rotating them on the edge of the wall and then spreading the fire before putting the pots into the hot coal bed. And what we did here, we built a rather large oak log pot, and then we spread the logs to the outside and reduced the middle to hot ashes. And we took palm frond stems and built a rack and put the pots on that. And then we loaded damp pine needles, straw on top, with Spanish moss. And after the smoldering began, then we added palm fronds, dry palm fronds, and then the pit fire began. Of course, we didn't want to bring it up too high, because again, if it's too quickly and not dry enough, then they will explode or fracture. And so we stood around here and put some water on to keep it down. And the Indians may have done the very same thing. In fact, we put this fire out. We got to start it up again. And that's why it's not completed yet. But I'll use a shovel and we'll try to move some of this aside and take a look at them. Now, this is an absolute primitive method. The controls, they had to work very, very diligently to experiment, and I imagine a lot of it was hit and miss by the seat of the pants type technology. until they did develop something and maybe used it over and over again and refining the method, and then maybe further experimentation with the tempering. And two, they had to find their clay deposits. That was another thing, on the riverbeds, any sedimentary areas, or alluvial areas, maybe farther north. But in the climate, it's such an adverse thing, the climate in the south with the humidity. In the southwest, where it's much, much drier, their processes in the firing process are, I don't want to by any means say they're any easier, but it does help to have it very, very dry in those areas. They don't have the degrees that we're developing here. Let's see, take a shovel. What I'd like to do, we'll take a look at this to see if it turned out at all.
Will red clay work on that?
Yes, you could probably take any clay, any clay body, and mix it with water, and temper it, try fiber tempering, and just make sure, to make sure it's dry, and let it sit in a dry area. I wouldn't expose it to the sun right away. Don't do that. It'll dry it out too fast. By doing that, you'll cause it to fracture. But let it dry in a cool, dry, shady area, maybe in an air-conditioned room, away from a window, and then before the firing, then expose it to the sun after it's dry in a cool, shady area.
Well, when you buy, say, Georgia red clay at, for instance, where I buy at Bill's bookstore in Tallahassee, is that tempered? It comes in a big block, Georgia red clay, it comes big plastic sack, and you buy it at Bill's. And now, is that already
It's
tempered?
like probably the commercial clay that I buy. I'm not that familiar with the red clay, but it probably has its own mica in it and it's sand. And that was another tempering agent that they used, and that was the sand mixed with that. And it's and also crushed shards, crushed pottery shards they would use. Both very good tempering agents.
Well, when I was a little girl, we used to go see my grandmother in Grand Ridge when she was about 20 miles north, and they had this deep ditch, and we could get all different colored clay, green and pink and white. And
that's great.
yeah, it was.
You have to go dig some out.
I know. I haven't been back. She died a long time ago. But yeah,
that may have been used even by the Native Americans at one time, if there's that much.
And it would just be in layers. You'd have a pink layer and then a green layer.
Oh, that's neat.
Just right there together.
That's neat. Which would probably produce various different kinds of colors in the firing process. There are the two different kinds of firing. Most of the primitive firing, of course, is an oxidation, which is exposing the fired pots and letting them cool, exposing them to the air and not smothering. And most of your oxidized colors will be grays or a buff color. The reducing method is done primarily in kilns, primitive kilns, by covered kilns, maybe a clay kiln or a rock kiln, maybe chiseled into the side of a mountain or something, or made from fired bricks. But reducing a fire, now your southwestern potters do reduce. That is to smother a fire while they're in the firing process, take away all oxygen. And probably your Moundville pottery, a lot of that was reduced. When you smother the fire, it takes away all of the oxygen, the air, and the pot just reaches out for that in the burning process and just sucks in all the carbon that's around it, and it turns very, very black, in some cases very, very shiny black. And so a lot of your southwestern pottery is reduced pottery. And then the oxidation is the natural cooling process with the exposure to the air. The difference is taken away and reduced. And my own personal methods, I haven't done very much of this. I'm familiar with it, but because of the breakage problem, what I do, I bisque my pots. I buy a wide range commercial stoneware clay, and I bisque my pots first in a regular electric kiln, and I take it up to 1600 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for a period of several hours, and it turns a pink to an orange, maybe a buff color. And I will sometimes paint red iron oxides or terra sigillata, red terra sigillata, which is very fine clay, red clay, body on my pots. And thereby what I'm doing, I'm tempering those pots and evenly tempering them and giving them strength. And after that process, I put them into a 55-gallon oil drum and it's similar to a raku, not quite raku, but similar to it if anybody here is familiar with raku firing. I put them in an oil drum filled with sawdust and dung, which could either be horse manure or cow patties. But cow patties work the best. I found that. I didn't have access to those this time, so I brought some road apples along and mixed that around the pot. They will give and should give some buff coloring or some light color as compared to some of the grays. And I have done some of that here, and we can go up on the hill there in just a moment. And I fired. Why don't we put the lid down? Drop them on the lid.
And they stay in this drum a few days, they
This
say?
has been burning since. Yesterday afternoon.
It's got a frog pot in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've got several books right now. Checked out that stuff.
I have to let my fingers cool. They're pretty hot.
Where's the line?
I can take this one out. There's only two.
That's right.
This one has a, I just sort of whipped this up and put a check stamp on the side, but much like the Indians did it, they made paddles for the check stamping, and this paddle is on. I stole one of my wife's kitchen paddles to do that, and she wasn't too happy about that. So. But it works, and the indentations aren't too very great, but it does show it was a very common design. Besides, there was linear and punctated, but the check stamping was very common in the Southeast. So that's the modern primitive method there.
How long does it take them to cool off completely?
It might take within an hour.
Did you set them deliberately on that in case there was moisture in the grass?
Yes, in fact, Terry did suggest that, and I'm glad he did, because it may have affected it in some way. Yeah, it could have affected it. Probably not. But at this point, now they have been fired, and they are hot enough, though, but maybe exposing it to some moisture.
Will you
I want you to take your table. Can you tell him who you are and where you're from and where this comes from? Speech.
Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Rex Knight. This is my friend Gary Tenenfield. So, we're both from Panama City, Florida. This is our collection. All the river points come from the Chipola River in Jackson County, Florida. And the majority of the land points come from Jackson County, Florida, but several of them come from Bay County, Florida, and Calhoun County.
Yeah, you don't see it. That's like a tie together. Repair type.
That's fine. I never seen one that was different.
I found a few of these like that, you know. babies have so many different kind of little types and stuff like catahoolas and all these other things. Taco Creek, whatever it is, they're all kind of similar today.
Now, is he bringing that good stuff to the next one, John?
All right. Good stuff, good stuff. Force me into it. Break ground. That's a good idea.
What would you call this, John? It's beveled like the boat.
I think that's been resharpened. If you look at it down here, it's not beveled at all. Yeah, it's banged up a little bit. It's like something that's probably a lot broader, probably something like that. It just got resharpened there. That's a killer. It is nice. I like it.
I want to show them. When you were talking over there, he asked me about one. Oh, yeah, he was like, he said, no, Jim, the same day? I said, no, not the same day, just the same place.
Thank y'all, gentlemen.
You're welcome. When do I get a call?
Nice looking forward.